They didn't just change the story, they changed the rules of the entire world, and somehow expected no one to notice. Because here's the part that feels almost uncomfortable to say out loud. Bridgerton. Season 5 is not a love story anymore, and the moment you actually sit with what that trailer is showing you, not what it's pretending to show, not the gowns, not the glances, not the carefully staged romance, but what is really underneath all of it, you start to realize something has gone very, very wrong. They told us this was Benedict's season. They told us this would be his love story. They told us Sophie was the one who would finally pull him into something real. But what if that's not what this is at all? What if this is not about love finding him, but about everything he built to avoid love finally collapsing? Because Benedict was never like the others. That's what made him easy to watch, easy to like, safe even. While everyone else in that world was suffocating under expectations, titles, duty, reputation, Benedict just existed, floating above it, untouchable, untethered, watching the chaos instead of being consumed by it. He didn't chase love. He didn't need approval. He didn't play the game. And in a world like that, that's not just rare, it's dangerous. Because people who don't play by the rules don't break the system. They expose it. And that only works until the system decides to pull them back in. That's what this season feels like. Not a romance, not a journey, a correction, a quiet, calculated correction. Because suddenly, the man who never needed anything needs something. And not just anything, someone. And not just someone acceptable, safe, approved, but someone who was never supposed to exist in his world in the first place. And that's where everything starts to shift. Because Sophie doesn't enter this story like the others did. She's not introduced gently. She's not placed neatly into the social structure. She doesn't arrive with a name that protects her or a position that explains her. She just appears, and the world reacts. Not loudly, not dramatically. That's not how this world works. No, it reacts the way it always has. Quietly, carefully, with attention, with observation, with that slow, unsettling awareness that something is out of place. And in this world, being out of place is not a small problem. It's not an inconvenience. It's not something that can be fixed with charm or ignored with confidence. It's a threat. Not because of who Sophie is, but because of what she represents. Because the moment she steps into Benedict's orbit, the rules don't bend. They don't adjust. They don't evolve. They tighten. And here's the detail most people are missing. The story isn't asking, will they be together anymore? That question is too simple. The real question is, what happens to a man who has never had to choose when choosing suddenly costs him everything? Because for the first time, Benedict isn't watching from the outside. He's inside the system, fully, completely. And he doesn't know how to move in it when the stakes are no longer theoretical. Before, consequences were things that happened to other people. Now, they're watching him. Every look, every pause, every moment that lasts just a second too long. And he feels it. That's the difference. That's what the trailer quietly reveals without ever saying it directly. Benedict is no longer comfortable. He's not effortless anymore. That ease, that charm, that ability to move through rooms without consequence, it's slipping. And Sophie is the reason. Not because she's trying to change him, not because she's demanding anything, but because she sees him in a way no one else ever has. Not the charming version, not the easy version, the real one. And that is where the danger begins. Because in that world, being seen is not romantic. It's exposure. And exposure is the one thing no one survives without a cost. So now the question isn't whether Benedict will fall in love. The question is, what is he going to lose when he does? Because the system he ignored for so long is finally paying attention to him. And it's not watching with curiosity, it's watching with intent. So ask yourself this, if this was really just a love story, why does everything about it feel like a warning? And here's where it gets even more uncomfortable, because the danger in this story isn't loud, it's not obvious. It doesn't announce itself with dramatic confrontations or public scandals. Not yet. No, what Season 5 is doing is far more precise than that. It's building something slow, something quiet, something that doesn't feel like a threat until it's already too late to escape it. Because this world, this polished, elegant, perfectly controlled world, does not destroy people in public. It studies them first. And that's exactly what is happening to Benedict. For the first time in his life, he's not invisible in the way he thought he was. Not overlooked, not dismissed. No, he's being observed. Carefully, patiently, the kind of attention that doesn't feel dangerous until you realize it's not going away. Think about it. Benedict always existed in a kind of freedom that didn't make sense for someone in his position. He moved through society without fully belonging to it. He attended, but he didn't participate. He joked, but he didn't commit. He stood close enough to be part of it, but far enough to never be trapped by it. That distance was his protection. And now it's gone, because Sophie pulls him into something that cannot exist at a distance. And the moment he steps closer, really closer, everything changes. Because now he can be measured, compared, judged. And in a world built entirely on reputation, once you can be measured, you can be reduced. That's the part people don't talk about. Reputation in this world isn't just about status. It's about control. It's about deciding who belongs, who matters, and who gets quietly removed when they stop fitting the narrative. And Sophie doesn't fit any narrative. She's not just an outsider. That would be simple, manageable. No, she's something far more disruptive than that. She exists in a space the system doesn't know how to process. There's no clear category for her, no safe label, no explanation that allows everyone to feel comfortable again. And when a system like that encounters something it can't categorize, it doesn't adapt. It eliminates. Not violently, not obviously, but effectively. And here's the terrifying part. It doesn't just eliminate the outsider, it eliminates the connection. So now the question becomes, what happens when Benedict refuses to let that connection go? Because that's what this is building toward. Not a love confession, not a sweeping romantic moment. A decision. A quiet, irreversible decision to stay. When every rule in that world is telling him to walk away. And the trailer doesn't show this directly, it doesn't need to. It shows it in the way people look at them. The way conversations stop just a second too late. The way certain characters appear in the background. Not involved, not speaking, just present, watching. That's how power works here. Not through action, through information. Who sees what? Who knows what? Who decides when it becomes useful? And right now, Benedict and Sophie are becoming information. That's the shift. That's the moment everything stops being romantic and starts becoming strategic. Because once a relationship becomes something that can be used, it stops being private. And Benedict is not prepared for that. He's never had to be. He's never had to think about how his choices ripple outward, how one decision, one attachment, one moment of vulnerability can be taken, reshaped, and turned into something that no longer belongs to him. But Sophie understands. That's the difference between them, and it's the part that makes this even more devastating. Because Sophie doesn't just feel the risk, she calculates it. Every second, every interaction, every look she allows, every word she says, every moment she chooses to stay instead of stepping back. She knows exactly what this world does to people like her. She's seen it. Maybe not directly, maybe not in ways the show has spelled out yet, but the awareness is there. You can feel it in the way she holds herself, the way she doesn't fully relax, the way every choice feels considered. And yet, she stays. That's what changes everything. Because this isn't a story about someone walking into danger without understanding it. This is a story about someone seeing the danger clearly and refusing to leave anyway. And that kind of choice, it doesn't end softly. Because now you don't just have a man discovering what it means to care. You have a man and a woman both choosing something they know could destroy them, in a world that is already starting to notice. So the tension isn't, will they be together? The tension is, how long before someone decides they shouldn't be? Because the ton doesn't panic. It doesn't react emotionally. It doesn't make mistakes when it comes to protecting itself. It waits, it watches, and when the moment is right, it acts. So if everything still looks beautiful, if everything still feels romantic, If it still feels like the same story we've always been watching, then ask yourself this: why does it feel like something is quietly being set in motion, something neither of them can see coming, but everyone else already has? And this is the part where the illusion really starts to fall apart, because up until now, you could still pretend this is just tension, just build up, just another complicated romance wrapped in beautiful lighting and careful silence. But the deeper you look, the harder it becomes to ignore what the story is actually doing. It's not building toward a confession, it's building toward a breaking point. Because what Season 5 understands, maybe more clearly than any season before it, is that love in this world is not tested by feelings. It's tested by pressure, by how much it can survive when everything around it is designed to make it collapse. And right now, the pressure is rising. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily, deliberately, in ways that feel almost invisible until you realize how much has already changed. Look at Benedict. Not the version everyone remembers, the charming, detached, slightly amused observer who never seemed fully affected by anything around him. That version doesn't exist anymore, and it didn't disappear all at once. It's being stripped away, piece by piece. First, it's the hesitation, small, almost unnoticeable at first. A pause before speaking, a second thought where there never used to be one. The kind of shift that doesn't mean anything on its own, until it starts happening all the time. Then it's the awareness, that subtle, growing realization that he is no longer moving freely, that every room feels just slightly different when he enters it now, that conversations carry weight they didn't before, that people who once ignored him are suddenly paying attention in ways that feel intentional. And then, it's the loss of control. Because here's the truth no one says directly: Benedict's freedom was never real. It was allowed, tolerated, overlooked because it didn't threaten anything. But now it does. And the moment something becomes a threat in this world, it stops being ignored. That's what we're watching happen in real time. Not a fall into love, but a removal of protection. Because once Benedict steps into something real, something that challenges the structure, something that cannot be easily explained away, the system doesn't just notice him, it reclassifies him. He's no longer harmless. He's a variable. And variables get handled carefully, strategically, quietly. That's why nothing in the trailer feels loud. There are no clear villains stepping forward, no dramatic warnings, no obvious obstacles placed directly in their path. Because the real obstacle is already there. It's the world itself. And Sophie, she doesn't just exist within that world, she exists against it. That's the part that makes her presence so destabilizing, not just to the Ton, but to Benedict himself. Because she doesn't respond to the rules the way everyone else does. She doesn't soften herself to fit them. She doesn't pretend they make sense. She sees them clearly and still refuses to disappear. And that does something to him. Because for the first time, Benedict is not just questioning the system from a distance. He's feeling what it does to someone up close. The limitations, the quiet exclusions, the unspoken lines you're not allowed to cross. And once you see that, really see it, you can't go back to pretending it's harmless. That's where his reckoning begins. Not in some dramatic moment, not in a single decision, but in the slow realization that the world he's always moved through so easily was never built for someone like Sophie. And if he chooses her, then it was never built for him either. That's the shift. That's the point where this stops being a romance and starts becoming something else entirely. Because now, it's not just about whether they want each other, it's about whether they are willing to exist in a way that has consequences. Real ones, permanent ones, in a system that does not forgive that kind of defiance. And the most unsettling part? The trailer suggests that the consequences have already started. You can feel it in the way the background changes, the way certain characters are framed, the way moments that should feel private suddenly feel exposed, like they're happening under observation. Because they are. And Benedict is starting to realize it. That's why the energy around him feels different. He's not just uncertain, he's aware. Aware in a way that makes every choice heavier, every interaction more deliberate, because now he knows something he didn't know before. This isn't just about what he wants. It's about what happens when wanting something puts you directly in conflict with the world that raised you. And Sophie, she's already living in that conflict. She doesn't get to ease into it. She doesn't get the luxury of gradual realization. For her, the stakes were always there. The risk was always real, which means she's not changing. He is. And that difference, that gap between where they started and what they understand, is where everything begins to fracture. Because sooner or later, they're going to have to make the same choice. Stay or step back. Fight or disappear. And the story is quietly asking something much darker than it ever has before. What happens when two people choose to stay in a world that has already decided they shouldn't? And this is where everything stops feeling like a story and starts feeling like a setup. Because if you've been paying attention, not just to what's being shown, but to what's being withheld, then you already know this isn't building toward a happy ending in the way Bridgerton has trained you to expect. It can't. Not without breaking the very thing this season is trying to expose. Because here's the uncomfortable truth no one wants to admit. The world of this story only works if people accept their place in it. Not question it, not challenge it, not try to exist outside of it. Accept it. And for 4 seasons, that's exactly what happened. Even when characters struggled, even when they resisted, even when they pushed against expectations, they still found a way to return to something the system could accept, something it could absorb without collapsing. But this is different. Because Benedict and Sophie are not bending the rules. They are standing in a place where the rules don't apply cleanly anymore. And that's the one thing this world cannot tolerate. Because a system like that doesn't break all at once. It doesn't shatter loudly. It protects itself, quietly, efficiently, by identifying the disruption, isolating it, and removing it before it spreads. That's what makes this season feel so tense. Not because something terrible has already happened, but because it hasn't happened yet. And you can feel that delay, that pause before impact, that moment where everything looks almost normal, but nothing actually is. Because now, it's not just about Benedict choosing Sophie, it's about what the world chooses to do in response. And the trailer is very careful here. It doesn't show confrontation, it doesn't show consequences directly. It doesn't give you the moment where everything falls apart. It shows you the lead up, the glances that last too long, the conversations that feel slightly coded, the presence of people who shouldn't be paying attention, but are. Because the truth is, the decision may already be out of their hands. That's the part no one is saying clearly. Once something becomes visible in this world, once it's noticed, discussed, quietly acknowledged, it doesn't stay private. It becomes part of a larger structure, a narrative that can be shaped, controlled, and, if necessary, destroyed. And Benedict is only just beginning to understand that. Because for him, this still feels like a choice. Stay or walk away, fight or let go, love or protect himself. But what if those options aren't real anymore? What if the moment he allowed this to become visible, the outcome stopped being his to decide? Because that's how power works here. Not by stopping you from choosing, but by making sure that no matter what you choose, the result serves the system. And Sophie, she's known that from the beginning. That's why her presence feels so steady, even as everything around them starts to shift. She's not surprised by the tension. She's not confused by the way the world is reacting. She expected it. And that expectation changes everything. Because while Benedict is still trying to understand what's happening, Sophie is already preparing for what comes next. And what comes next is not softness. It's not forgiveness. It's not a dramatic moment where everything is suddenly allowed. It's pressure, isolation, silence, the slow removal of space until there is nowhere left to stand without consequence.